I think what happened after Katrina, and it really started before Katrina, was reimagining what public education could be here. And we went from a school system to a system of schools, where we really began to decentralize decision-making down to the school level and gave more autonomy to individual schools as well as accountability. We used the vehicle of the charter mechanism to do this, and that seems to have been a successful model. You can have autonomy without having charter schools, but I think charter schools gave it structure that it needed.
Well, after Katrina, obviously it was a city with no kids. It was a city without operating schools, and it was a chance to reimagine what schooling could be like for young people, especially historically disenfranchised kids, in a system that served some but didn't serve all of its kids equitably and with a sense of excellence. The plan over time was to take the schools under a different governance model, and of course there's a lot of policies and politics that go with that, but in reality what it did is to free parents to choose the schools that's best for their kids, to have the best educators in the city come to the surface to really run their own schools free from the bureaucracy that has encumbered so many educators and so many school systems across the country.
For New Orleans, the real unit of change has become the schoolhouse. And taking things down to that level meant that you were really empowering educators, both principals and teachers, to make the decisions that they knew were right for their kids. You were going to hold them accountable for that, but we were really empowering those people who know their students and know their families the best in order to make the changes that were needed.
All of it was catalyzed by the storm. It was the coming together of a lot of things. I mean, the buildings were destroyed and all of the teachers were gone, much like City Hall was shut down and all of the employees were fired. And so it had to be reconstructed at a time when it was in the hands of the state, and simultaneously with a movement across the country to move a little bit more to more localized governing through charters or through school choice. So it's fair to say that in education, maybe 100% of it was catalyzed by the storm just because of the circumstances it found itself in when the storm hit.
The thing that excites me about New Orleans is, of the 14,000 school systems in this country, there's one whose theory of how the world can really change for kids starts with the idea of putting power in the hands of the people who are closest to the kids. That means a system where parents can choose their schools and schools have to value that choice that a parent makes. But it also means that educators themselves get 98 cents on the dollar and are empowered to make choices on behalf of the kids that they know and love, rather than a group of politicians or distant bureaucrats being the ones who make those determinations. That shouldn't be a radical thing, but unfortunately in American education, it is a radical thing. It's an uncommon thing. And I think that's why the results that we're getting are uncommonly excellent.
We've seen billions of dollars of infrastructure improvements in the post-Katrina environment, and I don't think New Orleans would have ever seen that, nor do I believe New Orleans will ever see it again. So it was a horrible opportunity that ridded this city of dilapidated, substandard, low-quality environments for teaching and learning, and now really serve this city and our children and our families in a very significant and unique way that just didn't exist before.
So if you look at our schools now, we certainly elevated our performance within the state. We were at the very bottom, if not the bottom, the very bottom of state performance here in Louisiana. We're now up at around the median. And that change is very positive, but that still only makes us, at best, an average school system. And I think what we have to strive for here to be much more than just average. We really want to have a model educational system here for the 21st century, one that others around the country would want to replicate, at least the outcomes. They may not want the model per se, but the outcomes. And I think that's what we're all striving for.
The reality is that the outcomes that we're seeing are definitively and far beyond what it is that we were seeing 10 years ago. In the wake of a horrific tragedy has perhaps come some good for the long-term benefit of the children of the city.
I think the system is better. I think the schools are better than they were before Katrina. The numbers reflect the graduation rates are up, dropout rates are down, the achievement gap is closing. I think we have proven, everybody in the city, that if you give every kid the opportunity to learn and you give them a good teacher and you give them a good school, they can learn. But as I said, it hasn't been without controversy, and of course the new system isn't perfect. It needs a lot of work, but it's a system that's in its infancy, and I think it's doing really, really much better than we did before, but we have a long way to go with it.
this is still a work in progress. This is not a full finished product. We can't declare victory yet in New Orleans, and we won't for a generation, quite honestly.
The great legacy of all of this is the idea that creativity and innovation and responsiveness to the needs of parents and kids should be the first order of business rather than politics at the school board level.
Well, I think the most important thing is to recognize that a community can make sure that every child has a right to learn in a good school with a good teacher with good academic standards, that it is actually possible to turn education around and to make sure that every American citizen, every child, irrespective of where they are, where they came from, what their standing is with their family, can actually learn. And I think that we've proved that.